This budget is looking at an increase of $7.1 million. Now, the board's going to ask the question, which you should ask, how do we raise taxes by $7 million if we have a 2% cap? The reason why is because the current year's budget, the current year's taxes, $77,097,641. That's the current year's taxes. How you calculate our taxes for next year, you take that number, you use the enrollment adjustment that the state allows, which is $3,675,240. That brings our new tax base. Okay.
No, I'm trying, he's just asking what I want to hear what you were saying. So 1 second there.
Thank you for listening.
Continue, please.
This brings the new tax base to $80,772,881. On that number is where you hit the 2% increase.
From
That
that,
the number $80,772,881, which is the tax base from the current year plus the enrollment adjustment.
so you start from 80 million, then you can go up 2%.
Then you go up to 2%. That 2% brings us to $82,388,338. That's the new tax base. I had
2% of the 80 million is 1.6 million.
That's what he said.
What's the 82,388,388.
80 million already, 80 point something, I was up to 83. Yeah, go ahead.
What I had given you originally, the bank cap was $1,185,000. We've been notified by the county that we have to use all our available bank cap because in 15-16, we won't have it. It's gone. So I raised that to $1,872,480. Add that to the 82 million, it comes out to, on your budget, if you look at your budget sheet with the taxes, $84,260,818. And that's the tax rate for 2014-15 school year. Now, with that tax, this is the maximum amount of money that we can raise. Our state aid, and this is the taxes, our state aid, as you look at the budget, was $27,605,000. It's a flat aid. We didn't get any increases at all. What the Board of Education has to understand is in that $27 million, we had, the current year, we had $4.5 million in extraordinary aid. And why did we project that much? Because most of our tuition for SHI was being budgeted in IDEA. IDEA is a federal fund. Because it's federal fund, it's not eligible for extraordinary aid. We moved that into the current expense budget to pay for that tax dollars and move the other tuition into IDEA. Because the SHI tuition, extraordinary aid, means that any tuition over $55,000, that's going to be eligible for extraordinary aid. Depending on the percentage that the state decides to give you. This year it's 67%. Well, I'm sorry, last year, 67. We haven't received the number for this year. But the auditor had said that he doesn't project more than $3 million. I think we could be a little higher than that, maybe 3.5 million. But I budgeted $3 million for next year. We may have an additional $500,000. We may have an additional $750,000. I can't project that. So that has been reduced by $1.5 million. So our total current expense budget, well, the other thing too is the semi money. We have, in our calculations for our state aid, there's a number that comes up that the state calculates for us. And that's $137,660. I had put in $400,000 because we know we're going to receive more. However, the budget program would not accept that without any rationale. We don't have the rationale. So we went back down to 137. That may mean we may realize another $262,000 in revenue during the year, which is fine. So that means our total budget is $112,203,924. That's our revenues. We have to plug in our expenses. Our expenses include $42 million in salaries, $13 million in health benefits, $26 million in special education costs, and right now we're at $17 million for transportation. Just those numbers alone bring us very close to our cap. The other programs that we have here are mandated programs. We have to have supplies. The only thing we could take out of this budget were non-essential programs that were not part of the T&E or part of health and safety. And that, unfortunately, is courtesy busing. And that's courtesy busing for the entire district. Plus, the superintendent reduced the budget by $1.5 million in staff reductions. Plus, we reduced money in supplies. We went from $455 in classroom supplies to $300. So that's another $155. We cut every place we could possibly cut. We can't put the courtesy busing back in here because we'll be way over cap, way over cap. And we can't submit a budget to the county that's not balanced. And I explained to the superintendent when we were talking, we have to present a balanced budget, a tentative balanced budget. Tonight we have to adopt it, give it to the board, give it to the county. On May 1st, that's one of the resolutions we have to pass tonight, to have our public hearing on the budget. So between now and May 1st, we have to come up with a way to get the extra $10 million we need for courtesy transportation and all the other programs that we may have cut out. One of the items that I'm going to ask the board to adopt tonight, which you don't have to go through with, is a separate question, because we have to present it tonight to the county by Thursday. And the separate question would be to provide courtesy transportation for the entire district for the 2014-15 school year. And I would ask the board to pass that resolution. The attorney and I were talking about the statutes that address it. There's such a thing as temporary budget. That's good. Thank you. Good thing of the word budget. Sorry. Temporary budget that we can have until the election day, and then from that day forward, whatever the resolution on the separate question is, continue the courtesy transportation. Again, I have to emphasize this. The superintendent and I both don't agree with this, but this is the only way we can get this budget in under cap.
I'm trying to understand something.
Tom, can I ask a discussion question?
Mr. Fielder, please go through the chair.
Through the chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Fielder.
If we were to include courtesy busing, our budget would be approximately, according to how much is the courtesy busing, 10 million?
Well, it's about 9 million to change.
So theoretically, we're about 17 million short last year to this year, meaning from 13-14 to 14-15. We're $17 million short.
This year's deficit is $5 million.
We're raising taxes or whatever it is. We're raising the budget by how much this year? 8 million.
See, the taxes going up by 7.1 million.
7.1. And if we would have included courtesy busing, which we've had for the last who knows how many years, how much would it have been?
About close to 10 million.
Another 9.
On top of the 7.
So you mean we're short $16 million?
Exactly.
Not short 60.
1/6.
From last.
We need to keep it status quo. That's without the lift. That's even.
Well, you have to adjust the
Let's finish
budget.
one
Starting
second.
off -5. We're starting off
One second, Mr.
-5.
Silva, please let Mr. Friedman finish.
We're talking about including a RIF, which we have, we're not talking about status quo, because we're riffing on 1.5 million off, right?
Exactly.
And we're reducing a lot of things. We're not talking about status quo. If we would be status quo, we'd be about 25 million over, right? Somewhere around that number, 20, 23 million?
About maybe 18, 19, that's all.
Right, so meaning,
1890, right? 1890, just between first and last.
no, we're 17 and the RIF is 1.5. We're talking about $20 million that we're short from this year to last year.
20 million, okay. Round number.
I mean, it just seems to me like a colossal fail. You know, $20 million. What happened? I just don't understand.
Well,
In order to maintain status quo, we need another $20 million. To me, that just seems,
And that only brings you to next year. That only brings you to next year.
so
You have
we're,
no more surplus.
so Tom, where did we mess up here? $20 million.
We didn't raise taxes in 3 years.
I just got finished reading it off, what happened the last 4 years.
Not us.
And it's not, let me tell you something, even if you went to cap every year, you still couldn't keep up with the growth in Lakewood.
We said we should raise taxes. Then, what's the difference? Come raise it 3 years later, now you can't even raise it? That's exactly what happened. Let it be known very clearly. The fact is that every ounce of surplus was drained. There was no tax savings for those 3 years.
Through the chair.
It was baloney. Those 3 years, we drained our surplus and all that money went in there.
Through the
That's all
chair.
that happened.
$20 million to create a facade to make headlines.
That's
Through the
all it
chair.
was using surplus and money from around before. And there was no savings. Look at the numbers. They used $4 million one year in surplus, $3 million another year.
Through the chair.
Yes, Mr. Rosenbaum. Thank you,
The
sir.
corrective action plan is $9,777,000.
Correct.
The budget that's being presented to us is a balanced budget, and this is the only thing that we have the options to take out or not take out, is that correct?
No, they're already out.
It's out on paper, but we have to vote on taking this out or not. Was there anything else in this budget that we potentially could have chosen to put onto this corrective action plan that just got taken out and wasn't offered to us to remove or not?
You could,
I'm referring specifically,
look at the
I'm
budget.
referring specifically to line item 4520, which is removing $875,000 of purchase professional education services. Is that an item that we,
4520?
40,520 line item that removed $875,000 from, I guess that would be OT, PT?
That's correct.
That's correct. But that was not something that we can choose to remove or not? That was one of
That's
the
nominated appropriate.
So we technically can choose, just like you put the busing on here, potentially that 875 should really be on, could really be on here.
Yes, yes.
We can vote. Because that's automatically stuck into the budget, not something that we can choose. Removing this 875 is not something that's on.
It's a good observation, Mr. Rosenbaum.
But you don't have to vote on this corrective action plan for 2014-15. This is just what we had to send to the state, showing them they wanted to see what actually we were saving on in 2014-15. This actually, we don't have to show one.
Yeah, but the 875 is something that you're showing, you just put in here as a saving, removing this 875 without putting it onto the corrective action plan. It was something you just removed in this budget. This close to $1 million in OT, PT, in purchase professional education services, which is really something that should be, that's really would be the,
Was that the IDA supplemental account?
that is.
Well, that's something that,
No, yeah, it's, right.
So that was just removed without being put onto a corrective action plan. I mean, even if we voted yes or no on this, and what we agreed on, we technically agreed on the budget, that means we're agreeing to remove close to $1 million without being on the corrective action plan. That's just
No,
on,
but it's just, it doesn't have anything to do with the budget. These are things that the superintendent put together to show you what some of the items are for other, that were taken out.
so there's another item that I would definitely like to put on here, which is the $875,000. That would be on here that we can choose, should we so want to, like in 2013, 14, we pick some lines, yes, some lines not. That should be something that should be itemized on here, and not something that was automatically pulled into the budget. That's one item.
I don't understand that. This is a negative, so it's not like you can put it back in the budget.
Oh, you're just gonna really, you took it out already.
Right.
Right.
It's out.
So
So if you want to put it back in, you over the budget by
I think
$875.
Mr. Rosenbaum, what he's
I'm
saying
saying
is it should be put as an option on the correct
Well, if
action
we
plan.
stop the busing back, it would also be about $7.3 million off.
The courtesy busing was also removed from the budget, yet it was on the corrective action plan.
Right.
Okay, so what he's asking is, this was removed from the budget. Why wasn't this put on the corrective action plan as well? The same way you did with the busing.
You're supposed to not put it on there.
Okay, so that's a pretty, I didn't.
It's a good observation, Mr.
That's
Rosenbaum.
one. Can I talk about the transportation service?
Yes.
Okay.
you're saying
The
there's
transportation-
the IDA supplemental,
Yeah.
put on the action.
I mean, we spoke about that.
Why wasn't that put on there? Why not?
Okay, that's that. As far as transportation, we have numbers. Is this budget, I mean, tentative balance budget that for transportation, and these are the final numbers for transportation 2014-15.
These are the final numbers I got from, as a matter of fact, I got just this morning.
I got
Work
it.
over together and these are the final numbers.
So what I see that just on busing alone, your final number on busing for next year is about $16,384,000.
Correct.
That's a $10 million cut on busing from the proposed budget. From the proposed budget, it's a $10 million cut from the proposed allocated needs prior to doing the cuts. Okay, so that's 10 million on its own, and we're looking at 900, no, that's $10.5 million just on the busing without cutting 1.5 million in staff reductions. So where's the $2 million being lost? There's a $10 million cut in courtesy busing on your budget, not on the corrective action.
Not only courtesy, but every
On
other.
all the busing altogether,
Trips and everything else. It's
you have cut out $10 million in excess.
7.3 for courtesy busing, and then all the rest of this will add up to that additional money that we would have to cut out of transportation. Plus, we cut out other things in transportation. Unless you want to address it, or, because this is not all the only cuts that we made.
I've gone through each line item based on, we had proposed, the draft 3 that we discussed was asking for $26,441,000. The final draft, which is the one after that, which took into account these cuts, was $17,918,000. This was presented yesterday morning. Between yesterday morning and today, we found another $1.5 million to cut, because your proposed numbers yesterday was $17,918. Today it's $16,384. I'd like to know where the additional 1.5 was cut in that, and then once we do know where that was cut, there's no question. Where was that cut from? And once we know where that was cut from, that should be $10 million in savings just on the busing, which should reflect, we have in this 9.7, there's 1.5 of staff reduction, which is not.
So what is it? I mean, okay, I'm
So there's that.
I can answer the question, it's very easy. If you look at the 511 account on your draft 3, and look at the 511 account on your final, you will see that we took out the 2-month contingency for the courtesy busing. That's the difference, 1.4 million.
So that is the difference in the 17 and the
That's
16
correct.
million.
That's correct.
So that should be an additional 1.4 in saving on top of this 9.7.
It was, I was told to remove that contingency, and that's what I
So
did.
that would, again, that would be a 1.4 million savings in addition to this. This was proposed 9.7 prior to that 1.4 million reduction. So if that was reduced, this should be another 1.4 million.
Didn't the budget reflect the reduction?
One second, is that $1.4 million?
That would only be true what you're saying if we start the school year without courtesy busing. So if that's what you're proposing, your answer is
Well,
yes.
that's what your 16 million in the budget is proposing.
That is the contingency for the 2 months I was told to take out of our budget, and that contingency, I'm assuming, is going to be handled in another area of the budget.
So we should have another 1.4 million in the budget.
for September and October.
Mr. Rosenblatt is saying, I think he's saying that if the corrective action plan includes all the courtesy busing for district-wide, and that courtesy busing has a 2-month contingency, which was already also removed, I think Mr. Rosenblatt says that should be reflected in the corrective action plan, and it should have additional 1.5
There should be
million.
another 1.5 in front.
The corrective action plan is internal. It's not going to the city. This is internal. We're just looking at things that.
Right, yeah, I think he just wants to see it. That's-
And the one last item is that on line item 503, which is talking about aid and lieu, aid and lieu is suggesting that our anticipated budget is $884,000.
It's based on 1,000 aid in lieu children,
Okay.
currently at 752.
Okay, but we're talking about removing courtesy busing.
Yes, that amounted to 12 children.
That amounted to 12, there are 12 children in the entire,
Yes, yeah, I ran the numbers I ran the filters today, and you have to understand how that works. Most of the aid in lieu children are on peripheral schools or schools that are out of district, so that would make sense.
so then the number should reflect somewhat less than it was in draft 3,
It's about $10,000.
but yet not reflected.
I asked if I should reduce it by the 10,000, and because 1,000 or 1,012 they are just not, those aren't numbers that are certain, those are numbers that we're guessing at. the decision was made to leave that as it was. $10,000 out of that difference would be a very insignificant change. But if you want it, I can make that adjustment. So that 1,000 would become 988, and the number would be reduced by 10,000.
Yes, sir.
So it would be 874,000.
Mr. Roosevelt, are you done?
I have one more item.
Okay, go ahead.
Line item 512. Initially, up in the first three drafts, had 357,000 in the requested budget, and it was dropped by $100,000, and it was dropped by $100,000 and change. This line item is being reduced by $100,000 for the cost of the purchasing. The first three drafts had felt we would save $300,000 for that. Why the difference of the $200,000?
Because we were making double savings by cutting out certain programs. We were counting on those savings in those programs, and we actually were double counting savings. So I readjusted the 200,000 to 100,000 to give a more realistic picture of the savings.
So it went from 300 to 100.
No, it was at originally at 300, and then we went down to 200. That was the discussion we had, and then I brought it down to 100. Because as we were looking at this, as you keep cutting field trips, as you cut certain other activities, the late runs, all the different things that you're talking about cutting in this budget, the opportunity to save becomes reduced with the existing bus fleet, the number of buses that the school district is purchasing. So that was simply an adjustment to be more realistic based on all the cuts that the board was making.
Through the chair. Go ahead, Mr. Schwartz. I know the hour's late now, I won't keep anybody up very longer, but just one quick question. When you formulate the budget without the courtesy, right now, as this year stands, the courtesy students and the out-of-rating students are on that one route, that one bus. How do you divide that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Here's what's going to happen. If you have a school that currently has 20 buses, and if you know, let's say 21 buses, we'll make it easy. If you know that approximately 1/3 of the students you transport are courtesy and 2/3 are remote, so you're going to keep 2/3 of the buses in that school. So a school that used to have 21 buses is going to go down to 14.
So that's a very easy calculation in a large school, that the impact is not felt, because 21 buses going out to 18, you're still going to each
14,
neighborhood. 14, you go to each neighborhood with full load. But in the smaller schools, when on certain dismissals, you only have 5 buses, now you're moving courtesy, you're moving a big chunk of that, that student count. Now your buses are running less than half capacity. Isn't your cost per student going to go up now?
In a very small school, you probably wind up getting 8 in lieu instead of the bus.
And that brings me to the next question, is that where do we stand with the threshold this year?
The threshold, as of right now, is staying at 884.
Could that vary?
It could go up. It could go up, yes.
Now, are we doing different changes?
Every district is due, but Lakewood is the most due because we have the highest number of non-publics, that's correct.
To the board, one last item. 503, I want to go back to aid in lieu. In 2012-13, we spent $327,000. In 2013-14, the revised budget is $413,000. That's about a $70,000 increase.
Right.
And you're proposing that next year we're going to have a $450,000.
Yeah, you're going to see exponential jump. The jumps in your aid in lieu are going to jump way beyond what you would normally expect because pardon me?
We know that the 413 is not a correct number. That's not what you spent, this is not audited. This is yearly.
We are right now at 752. Mr. Rosenblatt, you asked the question. As you continue to go in Lakewood with more children and smaller schools start to open, those schools are not going to be picked up by contractors. The contractors are going to spend their resources on the schools where they can get the greatest number of seats filled and they can get the greatest amount of dollar per route. So the smaller schools that you can't achieve the efficiencies that you can on a larger school are going to see routes that just aren't bid on. It happened this year. We had 11 schools that normally would have been picked up that didn't get picked up on certain routes. And that trend is going to continue to get larger and larger because the bus contractors are not going to spend money on routes where they're not going to take a route that they can only make $15,000 on.
The bus contractors will have many extra buses if the courtesy busing wasn't being ran, is that correct?
Are we talking, you're asking about this year and about the trend in the in the coming year, the whole picture is going to, we're going to be going into uncharted waters as far as the A and Lou goes, because we don't know how many contractors are going to use the resources in other towns. I spoke to a contractor today who somehow got wind of what was going on and the fact that we may be doing this courtesy busing move, and he told me that he was planning on using his assets to, that he would be not using because of the courtesy busing in another town where he might bid. Now, that's certainly his prerogative. Yes.
I think we are all in agreement over here that it's time to wrap this meeting up.
Okay, I just wanted to answer the question.
It's 11 o'clock at night, some of us at work tomorrow.
If I'm being told to leave the
Yes,
building,
please. If we could, that's the motion.
Can I ask, what was the waiver?
Mark, can you talk about the waiver that the Lakewood Board of Education has requested from the state? Status,
Mr. Dan Bowles, I speak to it better than I can, but I understand we've requested from the state a waiver to go above the 2% tax levy for transportation costs, courtesy transportation costs in particular. The state gives automatic cap waivers for certain things. Lately, they have not been giving any other waivers except automatic in the statute.
Healthcare.
Raised health benefits and a couple others. We made the request. We had
but can you please give us your legal opinion? Is it within the statute of the state to grant a waiver for transportation?
It's currently not in the statute as an automatic waiver. Could they grant it? I suppose if somebody in the Department of Education wanted to, I suppose they could. Have we broached that with the county so far, and what have they indicated?
So then we go with cap, which is statutory, has to be on a separate question. That's exactly what they told me. I emailed them again today.
Okay, have they responded to the email from today? The email. Have they put something in writing that they are rejecting it?
I emailed him and I spoke to him on the phone. He said he wants me to put a formal letter into him.
Okay.
To reject it.
Have you done that today?
Tomorrow, we're working on this today.
Okay, so tomorrow you'll get a formal letter to the county superintendent,
Yes,
and then he will officially respond.
exactly. He said he'll bring it up to the state, and then the state will respond.
Through the chair, Mark, is it possible to pass this budget contingent on the waiver?
Yeah, you could put it in there and say it's contingent on getting Department of Education approval. I guess you just need to have a fallback position as to what happens if it's not granted. It is a tentative budget anyway.
You're approving the final budget on May 1st. We'll have a public hearing of the budget.
But I
If you don't like it at that time, you just reject it.
Well, hopefully we'll have 3 months to figure out if they're A, going to give us the waiver, or B, what our, corrective action plan or other options are. And essentially, we're just buying time, but instead of embarrassing ourselves by not passing the budget, and immediately the state seizing control, we're sending back a message to them that we are approving the budget only contingent. This is something that's very important to us and it's essential to our budget.
So you're just volunteering on what you're asking, you're saying prove it as is without the courtesy busing in place.
No, I'm saying approve it only contingent on the courtesy busing. We send the message along to the state.
This is not only courtesy busing, this is
All the items on it, the field trips and,
Public schools, private schools, we're talking about every item here is important to this town, and every item we need. So you need that, we need a waiver, and we need help here. And by telling them that we don't need a waiver, and just adopting the budget without it, even though it's tentative,
They're
gives
gonna come
them no
back.
incentive in the world to try to help us. That's number one. Number two is I have another question here. We voted on the 13-14 corrective action plan to freeze all non-essential health and safety related items. Why is that not on the 14-15 as well?
We're having trouble hearing you down here, please.
On the corrective action plan for 13-14, there was a freeze on all non-essential health and safety related items, which has been in effect since October 7th. Why is that not on the 14-15?
because we didn't include it.
Oh,
It's not included in the budget.
There's nothing on there that's currently in
It's not
purchase that can be
essential.
frozen?
That's not essential?
But is the purchase of the new busing non-essential that could be frozen?
No, it's not. No, it's not a
Yes or no?
non-essential.
why is that non-essential? Well,
It's
who
not.
decides it's a non-essential?
I'm sorry?
Is that yes essential or not essential? Is it yes or no?
It is essential because we're reducing the transportation budget with the purchase of buses.
Show me the numbers, how it's going to reduce the budget.
We did that presentation.
I think Go to the transportation committee.
That is,
Mr. Rosenberg, can you address that?
yeah, the freeze on all non-essential health and safety related items. One of those items is the busing. We discussed this in the transportation meeting we got a letter from the state of New Jersey, from I believe, Todd Flora. And we had this discussion yesterday about the busing not being essential, and the answer was, well, you're right, that's in the 2014-15 budget and not 2013-14. So the question is, why are we not freezing the 2014-15 budget as well, which this would be one of those items?
Because we're utilizing those buses for the regular routes, not for the
That's not a necessity. We have,
it's not a necessity, but it's reducing.
we have vendors.
It's
not an expense.
It's
not an expense. It's a reimbursable expense.
It's
You're otherwise paying the vendors for it. We're actually saving.
Yeah, we paid $74,000 for the buses. Buses are $74,000.
Is that the only expenses that are in there?
No, we have the drivers, they'll do the
And
driving.
we have health benefits?
Are they full-time?
They're part-time, right?
Because there's still $300,000.
We still calculate, we had a meeting on this, we had calculations, how we show savings. I don't understand why you're debating it, you're the one who was there to hear that.
What then? This is not my vote. This was the previous board member. We're putting a freeze and we're mandated to put a freeze on all. This is not, we don't pick and choose if we're saving money or not. If we make a
Purchasing the buses will be a savings to the district.
it's still non-mandated and it's non-mandated and it's non-safety.
So now we don't want to save money now.
How is
You can't purchase it.
No. It's a long, from the way I understand, the way I remember the presentation, which I could be wrong, I made a mistake, was that in the long term, there would be some sort of savings. But right now, it will cost us money.
How's it going to cost us money? We're doing a lease purchase on the buses.
Okay, so I'm making a mistake, I'm asking a question.
Okay, so can we vote on this as amended? Can we pass it over? I just gotta know. We'll discuss this afterwards.
Are you suggesting, just so I'm clear on what you're saying, are you suggesting putting all these items back into the budget
Yes,
and requesting a waiver from the state?
yes.
Yes.
They're not going to accept the budget.
You need a balanced budget. I think the proposal,
exactly
I think the proposal is to adopt the budget contingent on the ability to put the courtesy busing back into the budget.
And that's what I thought you were originally asking.
Yes, that is what it is.
Contingent, so, and the courtesy busing affecting public and non-public students.
It's not only courtesy buses.
And yeah, obviously, everything, all the other items, all the field trips and everything.
Through the chair, can we get a roll call? on that?
Yes,
Mr. Blackett, you can send a separate letter saying to the county, we're giving you a balanced
Contingent on that.
No.
a balanced budget. We are asking for additional state aid to.
We can do that anyway. We can do that anyway. This is contingent.
I understand what he's saying.
Moving the budget,
Well,
we're
that's
not
not nothing to do what they want to do. I mean, it's up to the board to do.
We have a legal opinion here
I
that
will
says that
submit
it's
to the
allowed.
county as you wish, and we'll be back here tomorrow night.
Through the chair, so for clarity's sake, if the waiver is turned down, then we are not passing this budget, just for clarity's sake.
Well, my understanding, and this is what I thought you were really asking, we're going to approve the tentative budget as proposed by the administration without all these items. However, it's going to be contingent upon the state granting us a waiver for all the items that are on page 7.
I don't think we'll get it tomorrow night because.
And so if the state says no,
It's
Lakewood board, hang on, let me finish. If the state says no, Lakewood board, we're not granting a waiver, we're not letting you go above the 2% for all these items, then the tentative budget is not the tentative budget. You're going to have to come up with something else by May.
Through the chair.
Yes,
If
by
if
May.
you don't hear back from the
By
state.
May, but not by tomorrow.
But But if the state doesn't get back and delays the answer, this doesn't automatically get adopted because by May 1st or 2nd. If we don't hear back from them by 2 days before this budget is due, it's automatically, it's not something that will have to pass, and we're still waiting for that answer on the waiver.
No, it doesn't automatically.
It's a tentative budget, you can change it wholesale from today until May, whatever the day is.
We're just essentially repackaging the
You have a
final
public,
budget.
you have a public hearing on the budget on May 1st.
Everyone's on the same page, it sounded like. I don't think he's saying something different.
Tom, let's just call the roll call on this, please.
So the motion is to approve the tentative budget as proposed by the administration contingent upon the state of New Jersey granting our request to go above the 2% cap for all of the items that are set forth on page 7 of the corrective action plan to the tune of
And I think Mr. Roosevelt,
prior to May 1st.
excuse me, I think Mr. Roosevelt wants to be included in the 875.
What is?
Right. 875 of IGA money should go back.
So you're saying request a waiver for that item?
Yeah.
So it's the 9777 316 plus the 875.
What about the separate question? We're not going to even ask for a separate question?
Well, we have time till May.
No, you have to do it today. It has to go to the county on Thursday if you're requesting a separate question.
And you're saying there's a deadline
You
for...
always drop it.
No, but Tom, just,
How can
clear.
we ask
One
for
second,
a
Mr. Bridges, are you saying that by tomorrow,
Thursday.
by Thursday, if we want to have a separate question on the referendum in November, it has to be done by this Thursday?
Right, this Thursday to the county for approval. Then on the 1st of May, when you have the public hearing, the public input,
Right.
many boards have done this, change the budget with the public hearing, the public
Okay.
input. You can say, we're not going for a separate question, we don't want to have it anymore.
Mark, can we, in May, can you just also confirm that? Because it is an important question. Are you aware of anything that would prevent us on April 25th, for example, put a second question on the ballot, if that is the only option that the Board of Education has in terms of raising the budget for courtesy busing?
Is your question whether we have to do it according to Mr. Gamboa's guideline or if we wait till April 25th? Is that your question?
Or any other time before the final? Yeah, can you just confirm what
Yeah, I was
Mr.
not aware
Bolt-
that we were under a deadline on the separate question for tomorrow. I certainly deferred to him. I didn't speak to anybody. I didn't know that we had to have the separate question voted on tonight.
Well, it's something in the statute, it's not something to
It
speak
doesn't
about.
say it in the statute. I read the statute.
You're saying it doesn't say anything about the deadline. So my question, Mr. Dunbar, is it possible that Mark said there's nothing in the statute that would prevent us from approving the second question in November?
The calendar for the budget is not in statute. It's established by the Department of Ed every year. They establish the guidelines for the budget.
Okay.
So it's not something that would be in statute anyway. This is the guidelines from the
I
Department of
understand.
Education that I have to submit the budget with. Are we going for a separate question?
So where specifically, Mark, where specifically does it say that it has to be, the public question on the November referendum has to be adopted by this Thursday? Mark, can you find it?
That's not. You have a budget now? Yeah. Give me the budget now.
I haven't seen it again, Mr. Gamboa.
Okay, I think we just,
You know what I'll tell you what.
Let's vote on that.
We can change it.
Also.
Like we can change things.
You can.
we can't change it.
It has to be-
If the state rejects the waiver, then the only option would be to put courtesy busing on the referendum. That is the only option. And according to Tom, you cannot do it past this Thursday. So it's important to find out what our options are.
Well, you have all these options. You can always drop something before May 1st.
What can we drop? There's nothing else. We have nothing to cut.
Well, I'm saying you can drop the rest of the separate question if you're getting the waiver. So you won't have to have the separate question.
You're saying that we should adapt the referendum contingency. But in my personal opinion, if we adapt the referendum, then the state would not have incentive to grant us the waiver because they're going to say, you go for a referendum, so why?
Let the people decide.
Right, they're going to say, let the people decide, why should we get involved? So
No pressure
it's,
on the state.
so I think if it's, again,
Let me
if it's,
find out tomorrow, for sure, and I can let you know. If I'll let the board pass a resolution tonight that if it is mandated for the 20th, then the board will ask for a special separate question now. If it's not mandated,
I'm at.
No. Because then the waiver doesn't hold any weight. Isn't that the point?
No, he's saying if it's not mandated, if it's mandated, you have a problem.
That doesn't mean that we're voting on it tonight.
If it's mandated by Thursday to have a referendum, if the state does not grant waiver, you will not have any option in the future to put busing in there.
If it's mandated, then we're gonna have to, we'll have to adopt a resolution tonight subject to not being mandated. If it's mandated, I don't think we have a choice but to pass the resolution. So, I mean, I'm speaking for myself.
I agree with you, Mr. Nixon.
But Mr. Dambola, I'm requesting that whoever's getting that information, it should be presented in writing. If the state is the one saying that they're not giving it to you in writing, number one is you better put it in writing to the board, the waiver, and it should be sent to every board member.
Talk about the waiver.
No, not about the waiver, talk about for the referendum. If they tell you that it has to be done by the 20th, number one is it should be put in writing by then. Now, the state does put things in writing, because I've got plenty of stuff in writing. And every time you request something, they actually write everything down that you told them. So they do keep records of every single conversation. And if they're not giving you a record, you should definitely take down their name and employment ID number and tell them that you're recording the conversation. Okay? Because there's no such thing. I deal with the DCA and plenty of other departments. Everyone gives out letters.
Thank you, Mr. Brisbane. Mark, have you reviewed the
I reviewed.
code statute, whatever we're talking about?
Yeah, there's nothing in code that says it's got to be done by Thursday. He's saying this is guidance that he received from the Department of Education.
Verbally?
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
One second, let's give a chance to the business office.
Once we're waiting, there is a possibility, Mr. Chair, that there's another $500,000 in this budget that's not budgeted for, which is the $500,000 for the grant, for the $5 million we're taking out this year, which we'll be paying back over time.
You won't pay that back until.
You wait a year.
Is that guaranteed?
Yes,
They
they
told
you don't take it
us.
first.
I was told, so at least we got a waiver on that. I said, at least we got a waiver on
They
that.
haven't even gotten the loan, what do you mean we gotta wait?
So we're making progress, we got one waiver, right?
It seems to be, your final budget doesn't have to be adopted until May.
We didn't get the money yet, but we got a waiver.
I'm certainly not doubting Mr. Campbell, I just want to go on record with that, but it's,
Yes,
yeah,
but it is a important question, I just want to make sure that we.
No one's doubting him, he just said himself, he wants to make sure.
Right, I get it.
So let's move on. Let's wrap this up, let's put everything.
My point is, if you have until May to do your final budget, I don't see why they wouldn't give you until May to come up with a second question.
100%.
Roll call.
Can we call a roll call, please? Tom, please call a roll call.
You don't want to know about the separate question.
Just one more minute.
Isaac, I am just going to get the book that Tom was referring to.
Okay, so it's going to take 1 more minute and then we'll wrap it up. I appreciate everyone's patience.
And here she comes.
Okay. Ms. Winters, can you recognize the people who gave a donation to the Lakewood Board of Education basketball team? Please.
Our game was canceled.
While we're waiting. We're waiting for this paper. It's here, the attorney is reviewing the document. And I think we should recognize, some page nine.
Can we pass this? Can we vote on it, please? Can we vote on this right now, and then we'll talk about the question afterwards?
We would like to thank Barry Lindenbaum and Kathy Lindenbaum for making a $200 donation to Lakewood High School.
Thank you, Ms. Winters. Mark?
Laura, do we have a big update for March 27th basketball game?
I'll give another 200 contingent on the fact that we can't see it right now.
Second.
Rabbi Sanders and Rabbi Otis, I believe, donated money.
Well, that was the top chef.
Can we recognize the gentleman?
Getting $100 for my notice for that. Is that-
$200? We expand to
Mr. Slackett,
Contingent on closing.
districts considering an additional spending proposal should review statutes and administrative code. Separate proposals must be submitted to the county office for approval prior to advertisement. You advertise the budget and the separate proposal before your public hearing. So you can't do it at the public hearing. It has already been approved
Okay, we have
for advertisement.
So what's the problem?
Why can't they advertise it in a month?
We could do it in the next
Because you
meeting.
have to advertise it prior to your public hearing.
Okay, so that's a me.
Okay, that's the next one.
It has to be approved. It
Let
has to
it
be
go.
approved by the county before you go to advertising. You have to understand that the county's involved with this.
How long does that take?
It's up to them. It take a week, it take 2 weeks.
Okay, so you said they're gonna look into this and
So
find
why
out.
can't April's meeting, advertise it, go to the state, and they'll do it?
Tom, wasn't that a question actually in the budget packet that you have?
Yeah.
It's actually in the budget application.
Yeah,
That
it's
Jackson
a budget application,
question.
separate question.
So the 20th is not a firm date, so you're saying that it has to be.
No, it has to be to the
Okay,
county.
with you, okay, so it's arbitrary date, the 20th.
No, the 20th is the final time we submit our budget to the county. With the budget, it has to go to separate budget, that's our entire budget. They review the entire budget. They come back and say, we reviewed this one, we got our budget.
The motion was made, and please, let's move on. The motion was made, it'll either get voted on, it'll either get passed, or it won't get passed.
Tom, please read the motion and, roll call, please.
The motion is to approve the tentative budget with the condition, only condition if a waiver has been granted for the additional $10 million for courtesy busing. and-
No, all the items on the corrective action, including the 875 by.
Minus the riff, minus the riff.
Minus.
No, including the roof, everything. We're getting a waiver for everything. There's nothing to be cut, there's nothing to cut in this budget. And including, Ms. Rosenblatt's $875,000, if we get a waiver for that, and that is the, okay?
And if it gets voted down, we're not voting down the contingency, we're voting down the entire budget.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Friedman.
Yes.
Mr. Greenspan.
Yes.
Mr. Jankovich.
Mr. Jankowitz.
Yes.
Mr. Munn.
Yes.
Mr. Rosenblatt.
Yes.
Mr. Schwartz.
Yes.
Mr. Silver.
Stay.
Mr. Tiff.
No.
Mr. Slack.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn.
Discussion.
Aye.
Wait a minute, the other items on that, the supplemental?
Addendum, so-
The addendum?
The addendum.
We move to the items on the addendum?
Yes.
Move it?
Yes, move it.
Second?
We were in the middle of a motion to adjourn.
We have items. We can't even-
We have items.
Has been adjourned.
Yes,
Mr.
Tom.
Friedman.
Yes.
Mr. Greenspan.
Abstain.
On the settlement.
Jankovich.
On the settlement. Yes or no?
Yes.
Mr. Munn. Yes. Mr. Rosenblatt.
Yes.
Mr. Schwartz.
Mr. Schwartz is a vote.
I'm abstaining, I know it's
Mr. Silver.
By the way, I was abstaining only on the item that Mr. Zimmerman asked me.
Yes, we're talking about the settlements, litigation settlements.
I approve everything except for.
He's abstaining on the JV settlements.
Okay.
Board members, please, it's very important, please participate.
And Mr. Slack.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
There's no more quorum.